All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruach double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone Well. Peace, blessings, salutations to the full elect that is out there pushing, laboring, believing, and listening onto this truth with our sincerity. All right, may the blessing let you be upon your houses. All right, the time topic of this lesson, all right, as you can see what's on the screen right now, all right, is being chastened. All right. The definition, I got it right here. The definition for chastening, all right, means to discipline, punish, or refine someone, usually with the goal of correcting bad behavior, taming pride, or teaching a humbling lesson. All right. And that is what the Lord is doing to us, man. All right. We have to be, chastened. All right. In this truth, in this walk, because where we came from prior to this walk, brothers came from all different, walks, prior to coming to serve Yahweh Shem Al Shai, but nevertheless, we were in the world. All right. We were, speaking on myself, Jake, I was in the world. I didn't know, the truth. I didn't have, that correction that was needed. All right. So once you come into this walk, you have to, in other words, kill that old man, put away that old man. And through us doing that, we're going through a process of being chastised, right? That refining process, that trying process, right? Where the Lord is correcting us, man. Okay. So we have to be chastised. That's the only way to get better. All right. Okay. When you look at a parent with their child, if their child is misbehaving or moving in a manner that they shouldn't be moving in, right, they will chastise them, right? They'll give them the rod of correction, right? They'll tell them, hey, whatever the case may be, situation A, B, and C, no, this isn't the way, and this is how it should be. All right, whether it's a discipline, whether it's some form of a punishment, whatever the case may be. All right, so we have to go through that chastening process, man. All right. We're going to have ups and downs. We're going to have times where, you're going to just be going through it, but that is part of the walk. That is, part of that building process, to ultimately get to that end goal of being better. All right. That's all it is. All the Lord is doing is building us up right now, man. However, we have to be able to go through that refining process, go through that fire, right? Go through that, so going through that straight gate, right? But I'm gonna grab this right here. This is Job, the 5th chapter, verse 17, and reads, "Behold, happy is the man whom the Most High correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty." All right. So it's a good thing when the Lord chasteneth you, man. It's a good thing when the Lord, puts you through that refining process, man. When the Lord corrects you, man. All right, because imagine if a parent, I used to hear this a lot growing up, man. Imagine, if a parent has a child and the child is constantly misbehaving, the child is basically being a demon out here, right? And they never correct that child. They just let the child do what they want to do, man. The average person would look at it and be like, that parent does not care about that child. They don't care. They just let them do whatever they want to do. But once you see the parents that are, constantly checking their children, constantly, correcting them, chastening them, right? You see that parent like that's a parent that cares about their child. They love their child, man. And that's the same way the Lord is with us, man. Right? So by the Lord chastening you, that's a form of love, man. Right? The Lord loves you. He cares about you. He's trying to, in other terms, I guess you can say, elevate you, get you to a better place, a better position, man. All right. Because when you come in from this world, you have a whole misconstrued conception of everything, man. You have to put away and unlearn all the filth, the nonsense, and the BS of the world, man. Right? Some things, for brothers, some things may have been hard to give up or harder to put off, man. right? But at the end of the day, it's a process, man. So you have to go through that trying process. You have to go through that, that purification process. You got to go through that chastening process, man. Because the end goal of that is to what? When you go back to the definition of chasten, right? The goal, right? Usually with the goal of correcting behavior, right? Or teaching a humbling lesson, man. So at the end of the day, the chastening that's coming from the Lord is to embetter you, man. Right? So when we catching hell, when we going through these different trials and tribulations, when we going through these different chastening, right? Take it cheerfully. Okay? This is a Sirach or Ecclesiastes, the second chapter, verse 5, and it reads, "For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity." Right? So at the end of the day, we have to go through that fire, to ultimately, get into the kingdom. Like the scripture says, through much tribulation shall we enter into the kingdom of heaven, man. It's not a cakewalk, man. We're going to catch hell, right? Even, matter of fact, right? Let me get the first verse in here, right? Sirach 2:1, it says, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thyself for temptation." Right? So when we come to serve Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, you have to expect, for it to be a difficult process in the sense of the refining of it, right? The refining process, right? Because coming into this walk is it's like going through a spiritual NFL combine, man, right? Or a spiritual boot camp, right? It's preparing you, for the championship game in spiritual terms, right? It's preparing you for the kingdom. It's preparing you for, the times of Jacob's trouble, man. It's preparing you to be, the next rulers, man. Lord Willie part of that number, preparing to be, part of the elect, man. Right? They have a saying that's, hopefully I don't butcher this saying too bad, but the saying pretty much says, everything that is worth having, right? Anything that's worth having or worth gaining, you have to put in work for it, man. Right? You have to, work for it. You got to put that work in. All right. And right now, what we're doing, we on those spiritual proving grounds right now, proving ourselves to Yahweh Shai, how bad we want it, how bad we want the kingdom, how bad we want salvation, how bad do we want it? So we have to go through that purification process, right? Got to go through that fire, right? There was a quote by, I believe it was Richard Nixon. It's like you. I believe it was Richard Nixon that said this quote. He was like, the quote basically said, the strongest steel, right, or the highest quality steel, right, the best steel had to go through a furnace, right, or had to go through the fire, right? And all fire does is it's a form of a cleanser, right? Of a purification process, man. Right? When you see people that make jewelry, right, when they have the gold and say, it's a gold block, and it's a whole bunch of different impurities in the gold and all these different other metals and particles, what do? They'll burn it, right? They'll burn it and put it through a furnace to purge those imperfect, right? Those not imperfect, but those impurities out of it to get a pure solid gold, man. Right? So in other terms, us, before we came into this truth, we were, we had a lot of imperfections, man. Right? We had a lot of, of ways to us, right? Ways of this world that was adopted from this world that was not a thing that would be found pleasing in the sight of Yahweh B'Shem Shai, right? Whether it was, idolatry, whether it was, shaving your beard, getting lineups, eating abominable foods, being just a wicked demon out here, doing all types of drugs, whatever the case may have been, right? These things had to get, purged out of us, right? Once we came into this walk, once we came into this truth, right? So hence the reason why you have to go through that chastening process, man. All right. We have to be renewed, in other terms, man. Grab me another one here. This is Hebrews, the 12th chapter, verse 7. And it reads, if ye endure chastening, the Most High dealeth with you as with sons. But what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? Right. And, again, like I was saying a little earlier, with the, example I was given, right. If a parent doesn't chasten their child, you're going to look at that parent like they don't love that child. They don't like that child. But if a parent does chasten their child, you can tell that parent genuinely cares and loves their child. Right. And it's the same way again, when the Lord chastened us, that's just showing us the Lord, he's dealing with us as like sons, man. He loves us, man. Right. So it's a good thing we're being chastened, man, because at the end of the day, the goal of chastening is to correct you, to improve you, right? To in other terms, to purge the imperfections, right? To purify you, man, right? Because we are looking forward to being the next rulers, right? The next, rulers of the, the planet Earth, man, the universe, man, right? We have to have that kingdom mentality, man. Right. We can't, in other terms, think as your average mortal, your average person in Babylon, man. Right. But that begins now. We have to start, doing what's required of us to be done, to be found pleasing in the sight of Yahweh Shem Shai, to be found worthy, man. All right. And part of that is what? Chastening. Right. Going through correction. All right. Even when you look at people that go into the military, right, no matter what branch it is, what's the first thing they send them to? The very first thing they send them to, right, once they get enlisted, they take their tests, the first place they'll ship them off to is boot camp, right? And they'll be in boot camp for, however long it may be, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, a year, however long, they do the boot camp for. But the first thing they'll send them to is boot camp, right? And in boot camp, what do? They chasten them. All right. They're making them, put off, bad traits, bad habits. They're basically putting them in a sense, or forming them in a way to be a soldier. Right. And now, if you look at that with spiritual lens, what the Lord is doing with us, we're in a spiritual boot camp. The Lord is preparing us to be rulers, to be kings, on the planet Earth, man. So we have to go through that process. Okay, there's no way around it, right? You can't you can't listen to the army without going through boot camp, man. You have to go through that process in order to get to whatever next stage it may be. And that's the same thing when it comes down to serving Yahweh Shem Shai. You have to go through that chastening process. There's no way around it. But at the end of the day, it is for your embetterment. It's building you up. All right. Get this one too. This is 2 Timothy, the 2nd chapter, verse 3. And it reads, thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. Right. So at the end of the day, we have to be able to go through this fire, go through the chastening, endure, the chastening of the Lord, endure the different, ups and downs, the different, correction, that comes your way, especially if you, first coming into this walk. For a lot of individuals first coming to the walk, they have never experienced, a certain level of correction, man. They never experienced a certain level of chastening, man. Right? However, once you come into this walk, you must see and understand that the end goal, right? The reason behind this is to embetter you, yes, right? To purge away those ways of the world, to have you in a position or in a sense where you can be found pleasing in the sight of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. That's the goal, right? The goal is salvation, man. The goal is getting beamed up out of this place, man. Right? And Lord willing, we are a part of the elect. However, we got to go through the spiritual boot camp. we got to go through the chastening. We got to go through the different trials and tribulations, man. We got to catch the hell in this place, man. It's part of the walk, right? We know what we signed up for when we came to serve Yahweh Hashem Al Shai, man. The Lord already told us, right? The Lord told us. I read it in Sirach, the 2nd chapter, verse 1. Right? The Lord already told us what to expect when we came to serve him, man. The Lord already told us what it's going to be like. We already knew we were going to catch hell. We already knew we were going to get chastened. We already know it's going to be ups and downs, man. So there should be, we just got to just deal with it, man. Keep going, keep pushing, because we know what is at the end of that tunnel, man. Right? Again, like I said earlier, anything that is worth fighting for, it doesn't come easy. You have to put some level of effort, some level of work into it, man. All right. But hey, I'm going to wrap it up with that. Lord willing, so is edifying to the elect of Israel. With that being said, I don't give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakwakadash, that belongs to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone Well. Peace, blessings, salutations, so for elect that is out there pushing, laboring, believing, and listening on to the truth with our sincerity. Until next time, shalom, and above all, Kwame Sharala, shalom.